Thanks for coming out tonight. So I think part of our intent is that I am going to describe work that will introduce Calder's presentation, and together our work should at least inform something of what Neil describes regarding Market Street and the plans for its improvement. Can I move this thing? So, a couple things. It seems to me, and I'm pretty naive about this stuff, just growing into the world of city design, city planning, and urban design from a humble landscape architecture background. But it seems that the history of city planning and urban design is rooted in the grand project, and arguably even architectural projects are rooted in the grand project. And so we're all familiar with this grand project, and literally I just found out yesterday that this was laid out by Jasper O'Farrell in 1847. And coincidentally, the Twin Peaks in that day were referred to as the Maiden's Breasts. And Jasper O'Farrell's big idea was to shoot an arrow to the heart of the maiden. And we can only imagine that the 120 feet, the width is to allow a grand view of the cleavage. And so here we are with this caprice, right, that's really set the tone for our city. And it's worth noting, Neil, that a lynch mob was sent after Mr. O'Farrell for his intervention in the city. So the grand project, it was of its day, O'Farrell's desire to create order in the chaos. This is Daniel Burnham's plan from the turn of the century, and you can see Market Street's the black line there. And Burnham had grand axes going willy-nilly all over the place, and there were very important nodes connecting all of these axes. And you can see in the bottom is his proposal for one of these nodes, which is a grand amphitheater that is Cole Valley. So it's interesting the sense of scale and how people were perceiving the city and urban landscape. Very grand, very big. And it set up a condition, this kind of attitude about city streets, that they are simply vessels to be filled. Now, the life that fills these vessels, these channels that we so appreciate, actually it's the life that we at CMG really value. Here we have an alleyway near our office. People occupy this alleyway. They co-opt it in a way. A little cafe opened up in the storefront, you can see. And this is a loading dock that served an old warehouse. People dine on this loading dock. They treat it as a beach. No one's suggested that they do this. No one's made them do it. It simply happens as a matter of course. And then there's a kind of implementation of a program, superimposition on what we have out in our streets and alleyways. There's a celebration of culture of specific communities and communication of people's identities. So as a practice, we perceive landscape as a medium, something like this, what this represents, dozens and dozens of interconnected threads. Some are material, some aren't material. They all have a sense of flow and potentially interconnection. It's these nodes. You can imagine where a project is defined. Your project site boundary might be within this green circle, say, and it has the potential to capture numerous aspects of this web, each one representing a different issue, agenda, agency that can be teased out or realized in material form, or a particular interest, or where these threads interact and overlap, these nodes of connection where you can start to imagine a concurrence of different kinds of facilities, things that we can provide or build as landscape designers, as urban designers. And so it's these points of invention at these overlap where we can pull something from these threads that we have great interest in. Anything that we do within the context of that great web is going to be an intervention. And these interventions become objects of accrual in the long duration of life in the city. This is a project you're probably all familiar with, or many of you are. This is Mint Plaza downtown. This is an easy kind of intervention to support public life in the city. It's an intervention relative to taking over the vehicular street grid and imposing a pedestrian environment within that. In this case, we've sort of optimized the functioning of this place to support public life by making it completely open. It's a classic kind of urban stage. Farmers market. Smaller, personal, contemplative moments. We've been working with public architecture. Now, long before Parking Day gave us the parklets that you see now filling up the parking spaces along Valencia and around the city, public architecture conceived of a program that was based on the same principle of taking over parking spaces. This was specifically to add public open space throughout south of Market, specifically along Folsom Street. And this was an idea to convey that concept that any of these could have a very specific program, ideally serving the adjacent communities or the adjacent properties specifically. Our first project, the first one that we were going to implement, was at Brainwash Cafe near 8th and Folsom. It has a cafe component to it as well as the laundromat. I'm sure you've all used their facilities. And it was a simple proposal to introduce a communal table and a barrier that would separate that gathering space from the busy road, and that barrier would treat stormwater as it passed through it. The intent here is you're serving the cafe itself, you're serving the community, the table's there 24 hours a day, anyone can use it. So there's a multiplicity in its function, and the intent is to support community gathering. And then again, there's this water component that's tucked in there too, creating a kind of hybrid condition. This is a small project on pro bono. The last one was a pro bono project also, actually. This is for the Castro Community Benefits District, where there was a feeling at the Muni Station that there was an underutilized space. And so a simple proposal to activate and catalyze activity in this area was a bench. And the bench was designed and built and brought civic cultural life. It's a well-used and well-occupied space. This is the Panhandle, another project that may be familiar to people. You also are probably familiar with the Panhandle in terms of its sort of function as a landscape. It's basically a corridor. Yet within that corridor, there are vast tracts of land, acres of asphalt area that are quite open, and there are lawn areas that are quite open. And in spite of this, again, this like Mint Plaza, this great potential for offering available space to the community, it's not really used. It's not heavily used. There's not a lot of energy to it, and it remains primarily a passage. This proposal was for the Panhandle bandshell. There was another sort of agenda to it. It was made out of 100% recycled material. It was built from volunteer labor. And this was a temporary installation. It was up for one summer. And it was very successful in catalyzing activity within this segment of the park, re-energizing this part of the Panhandle, making people appreciate the Panhandle, I would argue, in ways that it had not been appreciated before. This is opening day. Now, what was of most interest, at least to me, about this project was the fact that it had a calendar. The calendar was available on the internet. Anyone could go on. You didn't have to sign up. You didn't have to log in. You could just book a time and a date to use the bandshell. So it was completely accessible to pretty much anyone with a computer. And again, it hosted an innumerable variety of events, from library story times to performances. And at the end of the summer, although its stay was extended, it was taken down and has now found a new home in Seattle. So hopefully I've illustrated a kind of tendency or an approach to urban design from our office, a particular interest. This is the new Facebook campus. It's just been completed, or is under construction, I suppose, now. And it's, while not a civic project, it's of a campus scale. And we tried to bring to bear some of the principles that I've just described in terms of flexible open space, highly programmed, but yet flexible environments to start to energize and give, catalyze, again, social interaction and activity. The project is predicated on the idea of a street. The client brought that to us. They wanted it to feel very urban. The last thing we wanted to do was make a kind of Disney Main Street, a thematic thing, and kind of stage set. But we took some principles. So there's a long corridor. All of the program is hung off this corridor. This is illustrating that corridor. And then attached to this corridor are various kinds of open space with various kinds of sculptural pieces that are designed to not only be engaging experientially, but to support specific kinds of activity or suggest specific kinds of activity. This is a gallery space hung onto the urban street. This is bleacher seats where people can just hang out. They can watch people promenade on the street. They can put on informal shows, formal shows, and whatnot. And at the center of all of this is one large flexible plaza like Mint Plaza. So with that, I'll pass it to Calder, who will describe how we apply these principles in the urban environment.
Hello, thank you for coming. My name is Calder. I work with Willet at CMG Landscape Architecture. Okay, thank you. I'm going to talk about a project that we did called the Yerba Buena Street Life Plan. That was the name of the document when the whole process was over. CMG was hired by the Yerba Buena Community Benefit District, the YBCBD, to come up with a plan that would be a 10-year plan for improving the public realm in this district. The Yerba Buena district is 12 blocks between Market Street and Harrison Street and between 2nd and 5th. And in this district, there are about 10 miles of sidewalks. It's an old part of San Francisco with very large blocks, home to cultural institutions, the Moscone Convention Center, significant hotels and tourist destinations, and also a lot of residential neighborhoods and blocks, making it very diverse and a really interesting site for an urban design plan. It's home to lots of residents, as I said, but also millions of visitors come every year. And I think the scale of this district is something important to think about in a project like this. These are big blocks, industrial scale south of Market, big streets, and big urban design moves. This is Howard Street at the Convention Center. And what that means is that the primary public space, the streets, are oftentimes inhumane and not good places for people. They compromise the comfort, delight, and sociality of the space. And so the role of our plan as we saw it was to create or invent or add that human scale back into this district and to call attention to and make space for the small experiences that make up our lives in the city every day. So CMG was hired by the YBCBD, that's the Community Benefit District, to write this plan. And our team included Nelson Nygaard engineers and Sherwood design engineers. The CBD is a nonprofit organization that uses a tax increment, a property tax increment, to fund projects for and programs for improving the quality of life in the district, including street improvements. They're a small nonprofit organization, and very important to this plan was to invent something for them that was going to be usable and achievable over time between these two scales, or perhaps including both, for improving the public realm. So we had to develop a proper approach based in ideas and also with very specific projects that they would be able to implement over the next 10 years. Our focus was on changes that would provoke street life, just as Willett talked about, not beautification projects that change the way the district looks, believing that street life is what gives the district character. So it was a community design initiative. It took 7 months. We had several public meetings. We had other types of outreach. These were online surveys, events, things to engage the public in order both to frame the initiative but also to develop and harness support for these ideas and community itself. So the plan, as I said, was ideas-based. It needed a strong vision at the bottom, agreement on what public space ought to be to make it the type of place we want, and so that it carries meaning and relevance through time as the district changes, is resilient to change, and then the projects are responsive to existing conditions. They'll change over time. The goals were brought to us by the CBD, and we developed them with them and the community. They were things like enhance the unique character of the district or increase social interaction. These are big, big goals. We also did an assessment of what are the characteristics that make a district great or make a neighborhood great, and how do we bring the types of activities that we're talking about. What physical conditions do we need? These are things like streets and public spaces are used well and have value. There are no empty or neglected spaces. These are values, essentially. That would be the foundation for our projects. And then strategies that were specific to this district. Anchor the heart of the district, promote the alleys, make new social spaces, improve sidewalks for street life. These were specific to our site. And then the projects, and we ended up with 36 projects and initiatives that fall into those strategies, that work from those strategies. They range from very hard, big, complex, expensive, to easy and straightforward. And on the right, that was just an idea to bring taco trucks into essentially a deserted alley that's halfway between Market Street and the ballpark on game days. Some were site-specific. On the left, this is a dog park where there's now just a planter that really doesn't add a lot of value to the district, or the street, for that matter. And some were district-wide programs like street tree improvements. And of course, we were thinking about what's the CBD's role going to be and making suggestions. Do they lead these projects? Do they initiate and assist them, but ultimately hand them off to somebody else to lead? Or do they simply advocate? And the document, the plan, is a 175-page long plan that documents this whole process. 7 months, like I said, all the community meetings, what we heard at the community meetings. It reports on all that, as well as everything I've just talked about, and ultimately gives very specific recommendations and implementation steps for these projects. So I'm going to take you through a few. I'll try to go fast. This is called Annie Street Plaza. This is Annie Alley between, it's connecting to Mission Street, which you see in the distance there, and this is between the Spur Urban Center and California Historical Society. This is a proposal to actually shut down a very small part of the street to vehicular access to make it a pedestrian plaza, similar to Mint. Parkmobiles, we've implemented this one already. So this is on the other end of the spectrum, I think. This was a small, fast project. The community wanted green in the district. That's actually very hard to achieve given the way the streets and sidewalks are laid out now. So we created planters that can actually move and sit in parking spaces. We have 6 of these in the district. And of course, they provide not only planting, but also seating as well, social spaces. The idea is that they will move around the district and enrich many streets over time. This is another small street closure called Lapu Street in the south residential part of the district where there is no public space to speak of. There's an interior block inside the larger block, and we felt and tested the idea of closing a block of that to make it a park next to an existing community garden. We're doing benches and bike racks, and we've started this project now, custom benches and bike racks to support the idea of seating and street life and also biking. This is an idea, kind of a whimsical idea for solar-powered docking stations to bring the electronic activities that people do in Starbucks to bring it out into the public realm. These would be public accessible docking stations. And finally, Moscone Center Plaza. This is in the center of the district. Millions of people get their first glimpse of San Francisco here, essentially. This is where their vacation starts when they're coming to a convention. It's also in the very center of the district, and it is arguably the worst public space in this entire district. And I think by making improvements to the sidewalks and conceiving of it as a space, this is Howard Street between 3rd and 4th, it doesn't shut down vehicular access. It just gives places for the type of richness that we're talking about to make it the premier public space in the district. And I think this embodies both the large-scale and small-scale things that we've been talking about. So with that, I'll turn it over to Neil.